Tuesday lunch rush, the October sun beat down on Emma Mitchell's food truck as she navigated the lunch rush with practiced efficiency. At 28, Emma had been running Emma's Kitchen for 2 years, serving homemade sandwiches and soups to the downtown Cedar Falls crowd from her aging, but spotlessly maintained truck. The lunch line stretched down the sidewalk, filled with office workers on their abbreviated breaks, construction crews seeking substantial meals, and the occasional tourist drawn by the truck's reputation for quality food at reasonable prices. Emma moved through orders with focused concentration, her hands working automatically while her mind tracked wait times, ingredient levels, and the dozen small details that meant the difference between a successful day and a disaster. She had learned to see customers not as individuals, but as orders: turkey on wheat with extra mayo, vegetarian chili with cornbread, pulled pork with coleslaw, an efficient system that kept the line moving and ensured she could serve as many people as possible before her limited ingredients ran out. The financial reality of running a food truck meant Emma couldn't afford to waste time on chit-chat or personal connections. Every minute counted, every ingredient had to be used efficiently, and every dollar earned went toward truck maintenance, food costs, and the slowly growing savings account that represented her dream of someday opening a real restaurant. The man in the expensive suit near the back of the line stood a man who seemed out of place among the usual lunch crowd. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than Emma's monthly revenue, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to respect and attention. But he waited patiently in line like everyone else, occasionally checking his phone, but never showing the impatience that Emma often saw from wealthy customers who weren't used to waiting. As the line moved forward, Emma continued her efficient routine, barely looking up from the orders she was assembling. "Next, what can I get you?" became her constant refrain, punctuated only by the specific details of each meal. When the man in the suit finally reached the front of the line, Emma had her usual greeting ready, her eyes already scanning the menu board to be ready for his order, rather than looking at his face. "What can I get you today?" she asked, her tone professional but distracted as she mentally calculated how much pulled pork remained. The man was quiet for a moment, and something in that pause made Emma finally look up to meet his eyes. "Still remember me?" he asked softly, a gentle smile playing at the corners of his mouth. In recognition, Emma felt the busy lunch rush fade into background noise as she really looked at the man in front of her for the first time. Those kind brown eyes, the slight smile, the way he stood with one hand in his pocket, memory crashed over her like a wave. "Marcus," she whispered, her prepared efficiency crumbling. "Marcus Wellington." "Hello, Emma," Marcus said, his smile widening. "It's been a long time. 10 years. It had been 10 years since Emma had last seen Marcus Wellington, back when they were both students at Cedar Falls Community College. They had met in an economics class, two students from very different worlds who had somehow become close friends, despite the obvious gap in their backgrounds. Emma had been working 2 jobs while taking classes, barely scraping by in a studio apartment, and living on ramen and determination. Marcus had been, well, Emma had known his family had money, but he had never acted like it mattered. He had studied late with her in the library, shared his textbooks when she couldn't afford new ones, and treated her like an equal rather than a charity case. Then, at the end of their second year, Marcus had transferred to a prestigious university in California, and they had lost touch the way college friends often did, promising to stay connected, but ultimately letting the distance and different life paths pull them apart. Past and present, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you," Emma stammered, suddenly aware of the line of impatient customers behind Marcus and her own food, stained apron, and exhausted appearance. "What are you doing in Cedar Falls?" "Business meetings at Wellington Technologies," Marcus replied, and Emma felt a small jolt of recognition. Wellington Technologies, the massive tech company that had recently expanded to Cedar Falls, bringing hundreds of jobs and revitalizing the downtown district. "I've been coming to your truck all week," but you've been so focused on orders that you never looked up long enough to recognize me." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. She had been so consumed by the need to serve customers efficiently, so focused on orders rather than people, that she had completely missed someone who had once been one of her closest friends. "I'm sorry," she said again. "The lunch rush, I have to keep moving or I can't serve everyone." "I understand," Marcus said gently. "But Emma, do you take a break between lunch and dinner service? Could we talk?" The afternoon conversation 2 hours later, Emma sat on a park bench near where she had parked her truck, sharing coffee with Marcus Wellington while her afternoon prep work waited. The lunch rush had ended, and she had closed the service window early, something she never did, because suddenly the past felt more important than the present. Marcus explained what Emma had already guessed. His family's company had grown from a regional tech business into a national powerhouse, and he had taken over as CEO 5 years ago, after his father's retirement. The expansion to Cedar Falls was strategic, bringing the company back to its roots while capitalizing on the lower costs and quality of life that smaller cities offered. "But what about you?" Marcus asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "You always talked about opening a restaurant. Is the food truck a step toward that dream, or—" Emma felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with explaining how far her reality had fallen short of her dreams. "I wanted to go to culinary school, but after community college, I couldn't afford it. I worked in restaurants for years, learning what I could, and eventually saved enough to buy this used food truck. It's not what I imagined, but it's mine. The food is incredible," Marcus said. "I've eaten at some of the world's best restaurants, and your pulled pork sandwich rivals anything I've had in gourmet dining." Emma smiled despite herself. "That's kind, but we both know there's a difference between a food truck and a real restaurant." An unexpected offer. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Emma recognized that expression. He was working through a problem, analyzing possibilities the way he used to do when they studied together. "Emma, I have a proposition for you," Marcus said carefully. "Wellington Technologies is building a new campus headquarters here in Cedar Falls. We're designing it with extensive amenities for employees' gym, childcare, wellness center. We were planning to contract with a restaurant chain for the employee dining facilities, but what if we didn't?" "I don't understand," Emma said. "What if we built you a real restaurant instead? A proper kitchen, dining space, the works. You would manage it, hire staff, create the menu. It would serve our employees during the day but be open to the public in the evenings and weekends. We'd provide the space and initial investment. You'd provide the expertise and vision." Emma felt dizzy with the magnitude of what he was suggesting. "Marcus, that's an incredible offer, but I don't have the credentials or the capital or—" "You have something better than credentials," Marcus interrupted gently. "You have talent, dedication, and a track record of creating something from nothing. I've watched you run this food truck all week. You work harder than most of my executives. You're organized, efficient, and your food is exceptional. That's what we need, not a fancy culinary degree." Understanding hesitation, Emma stood up, pacing in front of the bench as emotions warred inside her. Pride, hope, fear, and a deep, seated uncertainty about accepting what felt like charity from someone who had once been a friend. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Is it because you feel sorry for me? Because you remember the poor girl from community college who couldn't afford textbooks?" Marcus stood as well, his expression serious. "Emma, I'm doing this because in our economics class 10 years ago, you taught me something important. Do you remember the project we did on small business sustainability?" Emma nodded slowly. They had worked together on a comprehensive analysis of why small businesses failed and what factors contributed to success. "You wrote in that paper that the most important factor in small business success wasn't capital or credentials, it was character. The willingness to work hard, treat customers well, and maintain quality even when it was difficult." Marcus gestured toward her food truck. "You've proven that thesis. You've built something real through sheer determination and integrity." But you're a millionaire CEO now, Emma said quietly. We're not equals anymore. If we ever were. Truth about equality. Marcus looked at her with the same directness he had always shown, even back in their college days, when Emma had sometimes been too proud to accept his help. Emma, 10 years ago, you tutored me in economics when I was failing. You shared your notes even though you barely had time to keep up with your own work. You invited me to your tiny apartment for dinner when you could barely afford food for yourself because you knew I was lonely being so far from my family. That wasn't charity, that was friendship. Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the memories. She had forgotten those moments, forgotten that their relationship hadn't been one-sided, that she had given as much as she had received in their friendship. This isn't me doing you a favor, Marcus continued. This is a business proposition that benefits both of us. Wellington Technologies needs quality food service for our employees. You need capital and space to grow your business. The fact that we were friends 10 years ago just means I know I can trust you to do exceptional work. 6 months later, Emma stood in the gleaming kitchen of Emma's restaurant, located on the ground floor of the Wellington Technologies campus. The space was everything she had dreamed of: professional equipment, ample storage, a dining area that could seat 200, and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. The restaurant had exceeded all expectations. Wellington employees lined up for lunch, just as they once had at her food truck, but now Emma had hired a staff of 12, including 2 sous chefs she was training in her approach to simple, quality food. Evening service was equally successful, with Cedar Falls residents discovering that excellent food didn't have to come with pretentious prices or attitude. Marcus stopped by most Tuesdays for lunch, and gradually their friendship had rekindled, though now it felt different, more balanced, built on mutual respect rather than the somewhat awkward dynamic of their college years. "How's business?" Marcus asked as he settled into his usual table with a menu he didn't really need anymore. "Beyond anything I imagined," Emma admitted, sitting across from him during her afternoon break. "We're actually turning a profit ahead of schedule, and I'm already looking at expansion possibilities." "I knew you would succeed," Marcus said simply. "You always had everything you needed. I just helped provide the platform to show it." As Emma returned to the kitchen to prepare for the dinner service, she thought about that Tuesday lunch rush 6 months ago when she had been so focused on orders that she almost missed recognizing one of the most important people in her past. The truth was that she had been so consumed by survival, by the daily struggle of making her food truck profitable, that she had forgotten to look up, to see the people behind the orders, to remember that every customer was someone with their own story and potential connection. Marcus's whispered question, "Still remember me?" hadn't just been about their shared past. It had been an invitation to remember that life was about more than efficient service and financial survival. It was about connection, about seeing people fully, about remaining open to the possibility that the next person in line might be someone who could change your life. Emma had built her food truck through determination and hard work, but she had built this restaurant through a combination of her own expertise and someone else's belief in her potential. Neither approach was better than the other. Both were necessary parts of the journey from dream to reality. Sometimes the most important business opportunities came not from careful networking or strategic planning, but from simple friendship preserved across years and circumstances, from 2 people who had once shared textbooks and dreams, and who found each other again in a lunch line where one had forgotten to look up long enough to recognize the other. And sometimes success meant learning to balance efficiency with presence, productivity with human connection, and the focused determination that built businesses with the openness to recognize familiar faces in unexpected places even when they came disguised in expensive suits and waited patiently in line, hoping to be remembered.